Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be giving you my long-awaited top 150 prospects in the NHL. In this ranking, just like last year, it's only skaters, no goalies in this. I'm going to be releasing a goalie rankings after this is out, and then I'll be getting into the prospect pool re-rankings after all the draft stuff and the different transactions that have happened over the course of the NHL offseason. But let's jump right into this video. I've been looking forward to doing this. I'll start off by throwing off some honorable mentions here, some guys who just barely missed out on the list. Guys like Dominic Badinka, Riker Lee, Clark Caswell, Quinn Finley, Oscar Fisker-Molgaard, Cole Beaudoin, Ivan Ryabkin, Will Horkoff, Kerbin Limitov, and Alexander Zorowski. Those guys were all just left off the list. Those are all some really great prospects, and the big thing, similar to how I said it last year, is the players in the 175 up to around the 125, 110 range are all very interchangeable, very similar styles, similar ceilings. They're all kind of those high floor, lower ceiling type of guys. They're all pretty interchangeable, and you could reorder them in almost any way, and I wouldn't really have a big problem with it. This is just my personal rankings of these players. So we'll jump right into it with the first player number 150, and that is Aaron Kiviarhu. Kiviarhu, it's been a roller coaster of development for him, going from the highest, one of the projected first overall pick in his draft class, or potentially, the second overall pick, one of the top picks in this draft, and then just kind of injuries and some inconsistencies in his game just kind of derailed his career as a prospect. But he's been very, very solid since being drafted by Minnesota. This past year was his best season. Played a full, healthy 52-game season in the Liga. Was pretty solid, and also captained the Finnish World Junior team and was really, really solid there and really stood out on that team as well. So Kiviarhu's a real solid piece for Minnesota, who tends to draft really well in the late rounds. Obviously, he's only 5'10", so that is another thing that held him back. So he never really grew after being highly touted as a 16-year-old. He never really gained much height from there. But there's a lot of upside with Kiviarhu if he can truly find his game at the next level. Next up is Eric Nielsen of the Anaheim Ducks, not currently playing, but committed to Michigan State for next year. Eric Nielsen's a real solid middle or bottom six type piece, third line type center role for Anaheim, second round pick this year. A real solid, well-rounded forward who could do it at both ends of the ice. Played at the J20 level in Sweden this past year and was point per game and was really proficient there and had a really good playoff run with them as well, and with Djurgårdens. So he's got some really good skill. I expect him to be a player who likely will be on Sweden's World Junior team this year. It'll be interesting to watch him. But a really solid, third line, fourth line center type player who can play a good two-way game, and has got some good skill to go along with it on the offensive side of things. At number 148, it's Luke Misa of the Calgary Flames. Luke Misa is a really, really talented player. He slipped way too far, in my opinion, in the 2024 draft, all the way to the 5th round. But again, it comes down to height with a lot of those guys, and it is the same case for Misa, only 5'10", but he plays a really good game. He's got a lot of offensive skill. Didn't have a crazy jump in statistics this year in Brampton. He was pretty much the exact same point per game pace as he was his past season, his draft year. Now he's headed over to Penn State to play in the NCAA. Going to be really interesting to see where he plays there. There's a lot of skill on that Penn State team. Guys like obviously Gavin McKenna committed there, and Aiden Fink, who was already there, and guys like Charlie Serrano are still there. So there's some really solid players over in Penn State. I'll be curious to see how he fits into that lineup. Could potentially be the center between McKenna and Fink, which would be a real promising opportunity for him to try and grow as a player. But I think there's a lot of upside in Luke Misa, and I think it was a really great pick from the Calgary Flames, who've done a really good job of drafting recently. At 147, we have Alphonse Friedge, defenseman for the Winnipeg Jets. Friedge, second round pick, last year in 2024, early second rounder. Friedge just a really solid, well-rounded defenseman. Plays a good two-way game. He doesn't have a ton of holes in it. He's got good skating skill. And, he doesn't put up a ton of points, but he's a low event, but also he can work on the offensive side of things. He can do little things. He's not going to be a power play quarterback type guy, but, he can hold his own in the offensive end, but he's better on the defensive side of things. Doesn't put up mind-boggling point numbers, but plays a good role, knows his role and plays it well. Another guy who he didn't play on the junior team for Sweden last year. I would expect he should make it this year. It'd be shocking to me if he didn't make it, and that would be kind of a disappointment. for his development if he isn't on that junior team as a 19-year-old. But I think there's some promise here with Friedge with the Jets. I like the potential on him. Next up's number at 146, it's Joshua Waugh for the Habs. He's had another guy who's had an interesting course of development over his time. Looked really, really promising with that call-up a couple of years back in 2023, or the 23-24 season. He played 23 games. He only had 9 points, but he looked really good in those games. He played a real good role. But since then, has yet to been able to really figure it out at the NHL level. There's been less opportunity in Montreal since that year. They've gotten a lot better, so it was tougher to fit him in, but just hasn't really been able to put together consistent scoring at the NHL level. He's been really good near point per game in the AHL for Laval. He's been a key piece for their teams. They've had some pretty good teams these past few years. He had a good playoff run with them. So the upside's kind of taken down. The hype's died down after that, the impressive showing he had his first few games in the NHL. But I think there's still an NHL caliber player here for sure. He's up to 22 years old. I would hope he gets more run at the NHL level this year. It's going to be tough with the Habs trying to turn a corner in their rebuild, but I think he deserves it, and he's earned that spot. I think he'll be another good bottom six type player for the Habs going forward if he can find a spot in the bottom of that lineup. But again, he's another guy, he's very flexible. He plays solid defensive hockey, and he can play anywhere on the ice. He can play on either wing, and he can take faceoffs if necessary, but I think he's more of a winger at the NHL level. But there's some potential there and some flexibility to stick him in wherever he's needed, which is always good in a player trying to earn a spot on an NHL roster. At 145, we have Lukas Dragicevic, a right shot defenseman for Seattle. Dragicevic is a real offensive defenseman who slipped due to some defensive question marks in his game in the 2024 draft, or 2023 draft, sorry. But yeah, he second round pick, 57th overall. I like this piece for Seattle. They need defensemen. And I think they potentially could have a good piece here in Dragicevic. He should be headed to Coachella Valley this next season, aged out of the WHL, but he had a really good year this past year. His draft year, he put up 75 points in 68 games, and then his draft year plus one didn't quite have the same offensive performance, was really bad on the defensive side of things as a minus 31, and wasn't point per game as he was the year before. But this year got moved over to Prince Albert, a much better team in the dub, and went back to return to his other form. Still has some defensive mishaps and some defensive lapses to work through, but still is a really, really potent offensive threat and works the puck really well from the blue line in the offensive end. So there's some real upside as an offensive defenseman, maybe a power play specialist type player for Dragicevic. And with Seattle, they don't have a ton of defensemen in the system. They've been doing a better job of stocking up lately, but there's still a lot of opportunity to carve out a role as a long-term piece in that decor. And I think he could be a guy who plays in a specialist role, maybe plays third pair with a good shutdown guy next to him. You'd have a real promising defenseman on your hands. At number 144, we have Cameron Schmidt, one of the biggest slides of the 2025 NHL draft, and he went to Dallas, who has had a good track record of developing these smaller, undersized players, and Cameron Schmidt should be no different. This guy's got all the skill in the world. I mean, super, super talented, one of the best shooters in the draft class, one of the best just pure offensive threats in the 2025 draft. Really, really good offensive production this past year for Vancouver. He's had some really good runs with some Canadian national teams, the U18s and the U17s. There's a lot of potential for Cameron Schmidt, and I'm shocked it took all the way to pick 94 for someone to take that chance. But he's 5'8", and the trend of the 2025 draft class was size, so it kind of makes sense. But yeah, that's the big concern with him. 5'8", 161. That's very undersized. That's not 5'10". That's not just sub 6 foot as undersized. That is very undersized. But there's so much skill in a player like Cameron Schmidt that if he can learn to play at that size, if he can adapt to it and play like a player like a Cole Caulfield, like a Logan Stankoven, and learn to play to adapt with his size when he's not going to be playing against similar players of his size. When he goes to the NHL and he's playing against bigger guys, whether he can adapt or not will be key, but all the skill is there. It's just more, will the physical side of the game disrupt him too much? We'll have to wait and see on that, but I love the potential in Cameron Schmidt. And I think for Dallas, a team who didn't have a first-round pick or a second-round pick, take a shot on the massive upside in a guy like Cameron Schmidt. Why not? At 143, it's Logan Mailloux, a player who was actually traded from Montreal to St. Louis this past year. Mailloux is a player who's got a lot of offensive upside, but the defensive game still has yet to come around on him. He's got really good size for a defenseman, especially for an offensive defenseman, and he puts up good numbers. He's able to score pretty well for a defenseman, but the issue is he still just lacks defensive maturity, and he still makes just mistakes that shouldn't be occurring at this stage in his career on the defensive side of things. Taking the wrong guy on a 2-on-1, getting caught at the blue line on a pinch, things like of that nature, they tend to happen a little too much for my liking for Logan Mailloux. So he slipped a little bit on this list as to where he was last year. St. Louis has a little bit more opening than Montreal does. I think it's great for him his development to get out of Montreal, because he was never going to crack that decor with the way it was looking after they acquired Dobson, and with the way Lane Hudson worked as the offensive guy. You got Caden Gooley, you got David Reinbacher in the system, and all the defensemen that they played this past year, guys like Alexander Carrier and Jaden Struble, that have all earned spots more than Logan Mailloux in that Habs system. So in St. Louis, he should have a better shot to crack that lineup. And try and show off his skill. But I think if the defensive game never comes along, it's going to be tough to see him holding a long-term role on an NHL roster. The reason he's still this high, though, is because that offensive upside is extremely high. And if he learns to use his 6'3" frame to his advantage defensively, there's a lot of upside, a lot of potential, and it could work well for Mailloux. At 142, another guy who's still got the upside, but, has some other question marks. Fabian Lysell. To me, he's got to crack the Bruins roster this year. He's had some opportunity to do it, and he just has not been able to. The Bruins, in their, tear down at the end of this year, there was a lot of room for him to crack the lineup and really play a big role and make a big impact, and he just didn't. It was a real underwhelming year. I thought there was a good opportunity for him to play meaningful minutes in Boston with the way their lineup was shaped out, and he just couldn't carve out a true role. He only had 3 points in 12 games at the NHL level, and took a hit on his AHL numbers, took a hit this year as well, going down from 50 points to 34 points, and then wasn't a big factor in those 7 playoff games he played. So overall, Lysell's still got upside and was a first-round pick for a reason. Still has a lot of skill to his game, but he's struggled to adapt to the NHL. And if it's not this year, it's starting to feel like when. It's starting to feel like an if and not a when at this point. So if it's not this year, he's probably going to slip even further down these rankings. The longer he stays as a prospect, the further he'll slip down the prospect rankings, because he's got to get himself enough ice time, enough games to not be a prospect anymore, because he shouldn't be. He should be able to play at the NHL level, and that's going to be the biggest test for him this year, is trying to carve out that full-time NHL role. At 141, it's Drew Fortescue, good shutdown defenseman for the New York Rangers system. I like Fortescue's game a lot. He impressed me in some of the areas he played this past year, especially at the World Juniors these past couple seasons. He's been a really good defensive force for the American team. Just low event. He's not going to wow you with his game, but a nice low event defensive defenseman. Every team desires that in one way or another, especially when he's got good size at 6'2". He's got work to fill out his frame. He's only 176 pounds, but I imagine once he gets to the NHL and leaves Boston College, he'll get on that NHL training regimen and can add some pounds that way. But the defensive mind he has, he's a really smart, sound, calm defensive defenseman who's just, again, no risks, doesn't make any splashy plays, isn't going to wow you with some of the plays he makes, but is also not going to go, ooh, what was he doing there? He just is real calm, composed. He's a guy where there's not a lot of upside in him, as much more than maybe a second pair shutdown guy, but the floor is really high in my opinion. I think the odds are very good he'll be at the worst, a third pair shutdown guy, and every team is that's a very desirable asset in a defenseman, a guy who can just go out whenever you need him and just shut down whatever line he's playing against. I think that's a guy you can get in Drew Fortescue. Some of the skills like the skating and whatnot aren't quite elite level that you would hope in like a first pair defense shutdown guy, but for a third pair shutdown guy, I think there's a lot of upside here in Drew Fortescue as that third pair guy, and I think the Rangers have got themselves a solid piece. At 140, Ryder Ritchie, 2024 second-round pick for Minnesota. Ryder Ritchie's a real talented piece as well. A lot of skill on him. Another guy who the size could become a question mark, but I don't think it will be with him. He's definitely not a super undersized like a Cameron Schmidt type, but he's not the prototypical big you're hoping for. But he's got a lot of skills. Has been a good scorer over in the WHL, and now is headed over to the NCAA. Had a good breakout or bounce back, I'd say, year this year for Medicine Hat, going from Prince Albert to Medicine Hat. Again, a much better situation, a lot more opportunity to work with better players. And he was point per game in the playoff run they went on to the Memorial Cup. Had a really good run there. And now he's headed to BU, and that's going to be a real good opportunity for him to succeed even more. So overall, he's been a steady development, hasn't really had a major breakout to skyrocket up any lists, but he's got some good skill and has proved himself as a talented player who's got some middle six type scoring forward upside moving forward here, and should be a real fun guy to watch at BU this year. I'll be interested to see where he lines up for them. But another player from Minnesota drafted in the second round in 2024 who looks to be a solid NHL caliber piece. At number 139 is the guy who went right after him in the 2024 draft, Tanner Howe. Tanner Howe is the prototypical low ceiling, high floor type player. I think this guy's going to be a great fourth, third line, grinded out. He's small, he's only 5'11", and that deters people, but he plays a really, really hard game. He hits, and he's always hard on that forecheck. He plays a physical style. Doesn't have all the skill in the world, but can still, you put him with some good line mates, as we saw when he was playing in Regina with Connor Bedard, he can help score. He can help facilitate scoring as much as you want. But his true role is going to be as a bottom six energy guy who just gives you 100% on every shift and really just grinds it out. Also a great leader. He's worn a letter for Regina the past couple of years as the captain and has been really solid. He got traded to Calgary this year, was really solid for them. 39 points in 37 games and a plus 37. Also was pretty good in their playoff run. Was named to the Canadian junior team and had had a good performance there as well. Worked well in the fourth line. I thought, he wasn't wowing you with his skills or his scoring. He made a couple nice plays, got an assist, a goal in the tournament. It was a nice goal. But what impressed you about him is, you set up your fourth line and he played that fourth line role to perfection. He drove hard, he forechecked hard, he hit, and he just got in there. And that's what you want out of that kind of player. So I have him at this spot just because I think there's a very high chance of him being an NHL caliber player. He's never going to be the high-end guy that he was once projected as when he was playing with Bedard as that, 16-year-old, 17-year-old. But, so yeah, that was more a product of Bedard, but the potential for him to be a great role player is still very high in my opinion. At number 138, it's a big riser on my list, a guy I became more familiar with as this past year went on. I think that's the big thing with this list compared to last year's is there's a lot more spending all year reviewing these prospects and catching the breakouts. There's a lot more guys that have just skyrocketed up these lists and have really put me onto their game. And this is Dmitry Buchelnikov for the Detroit Red Wings. Undersized forward, another one, but has had some really good KHL numbers, and to me, that's really promising for an undersized forward, is he's playing at a really high level in a men's league, in the KHL, the second best league in the world, and he has no real problem adapting to the extra size of that level. 54 points in 65 games this year, a really big breakout year. He was half point per game the past season with 29 points in 55 games, and then, really broke onto the scene this past year with 54 points in 65 games. That's really impressive stuff. He's staying in the KHL this year. He's 21 years old, so we'll see when he makes the jump over to the NHL. But there's a lot of potential there. If you can have another season similar to how he played this year, you've got yourself a pretty solid prospect on your hands that has got a lot of potential, a lot of upside for the Detroit Red Wings there after a really big breakout season. At number 137, it's Cole McKinney of the San Jose Sharks. Another really good bottom six guy. I think he's going to be a real good third line center for San Jose. I think it's going to be really interesting to watch as the team grows and as the players come up for San Jose. Him and Philip Beested are going to be really interesting to watch as who will take that 3C role because they both play very similar games. Cole McKinney is a really great two-way guy, great in the face-off dot, and has isn't a good enough defensively that you can rely on him on the PK. Again, very similar to Beested. Beested was great in the face-off dot and can be enough of a defensive game to kill penalties. And San Jose has made a good effort in, they got all the top-end talent in the world. We've seen it with guys like, just on their roster right now with Eklund and Celebrini and Smith and then Misa and Chernyshov and Musty. They have top-end talent. There's no worry about that. But done a good job of also grabbing guys like McKinney and guys like Beested who could play roles in your bottom six at a high level and fill out the rest of your lineup, because you can't win with just skill. You got to have some penalty killers, some defensive guys, some two-way forwards. That's what Cole McKinney is right here. Perfect size for a two-way centerman, 6 foot, 200 pounds. As I said, right-handed, also a right-handed shot, which is also, it's an underrated bonus for a player like this. Is it's rare to find, right-handed centermen are very elusive for a lot of these top teams. So grabbing one here who can take faceoffs on that side of the ice is a real good bonus to have. But had a really good year for the US NTDP, 60 and 60 for them, and played really well for the U18s as well. Going to Michigan pumps out great talent like nobody's business. There should be no concerns about his development there. So should be some high upside there. He's got a chance to make the World Junior roster for Team USA. He's going to have to fight out with a couple other guys fighting for similar roles, guys like Kamil Bednarik and William Moore. Those guys will be fighting for the roles as the 4C to 3C on this roster. McKinney's got a good shot to make it though. He's had a decent summer showcase, nothing out of this world crazy, but had a good summer showcase. So it'll be interesting to watch him and see if he can make this roster. He'll definitely be on it next year when he's the 19-year-old age group. But as an 18-year-old, he's got a shot for sure, which is also impressive to see. At 136, it's Lenny Haminiho, butchering the name there, but he's had a real similar development path to a prospect I love, and that is Ville Koivunen. Similar styles, both played in the Liga, and both broke out at the age 20 season. He had 51 points in 58 games. The league is a really skilled league, so this is an impressive performance for him. And I think he's already signed with the Devils, so he's going to be headed over, probably going to be playing in the AHL this next season. But I'm really going to be watching closely to see what he can do, if he can take a similar path to Koivunen, who had that big breakout in the Liga, came over to Wilkes-Barre Scranton, and had a really amazing rookie year, was arguably the best rookie in all of the AHL. It'll be interesting to watch for Haminiho as well, if he can do something similar here for New Jersey. He also got named to the World Championship team for Finland and had 4 points in 8 games there. So he's played at a lot of high levels and has performed pretty well. Like, this is an impressive development for him, a big breakout after 31 points last year, a 20-point jump, staying in the Liga. So some really impressive stuff. And he's been playing in the Liga for the past 3 years, which is, again, that's impressive. As a 20-year-old, that means he was playing in the men's league in Finland when he was 17, when he was 18, when he was one of the younger players, probably one of the youngest players in the league, and was still putting up respectable numbers, got the prototypical size. I think he's going to be a real good scoring winger for the middle six of the Devils down the line here as he develops. At 135, it's Bill Zonin of the Penguins. Zonin was an interesting pick. I think he... with I talked about it in a couple of my reviews for the draft, and when I was just walking for the draft class in general for this year, the guys in that range were all very similarly rated for me, and I think you could have gone anyway. I had Zonin a little lower than this pick, but he rose up, and it's understandable why. There is some real good upside here as a middle six forward. For the Penguins, really good size, and it's got a lot of skill with it too. Can play make well, can facilitate offense well. He's not a shooter, like a shoot first type player. He's more of a passer. He's more of a playmaker type, but has a lot of offensive skill and a great offensive mind. Had 83 points in 64 games this year. The biggest knock on Zonin has been his skating. We'll see if he can grow that over the course of the next few years. I'm not overly worried about it, though. Watching Rucker McGroarty this year in Pittsburgh, in the Pittsburgh system, he had similar issues. He was, similar size, not quite similar styles, but similar size, similar builds, and similar weaknesses with the skating. That was what held him back at the NHL level. Goes over to Wilkes-Barre Scranton, and the team there did a wonderful job of really helping him work on his skating ability and really hone in on the issues he had, and he really improved a ton, and you really noticed that when he came back up to the NHL level at the end of the year, his skating was considerably better, and he fit in much, much better at the NHL level. So with Zonin, hopefully he can figure it out, sooner than later. It's better to figure it out quickly than to wait, but if he has to wait, I have confidence in the Pittsburgh system in being able to fix that issue and hone in on that skill. But there's a lot of upside with Zonin. If you can figure that out, I think you're looking at a real good middle six scorer who can facilitate offense really well and plays a real hard game too. So I'm excited to watch him develop for the Penguins. At number 134, it's Jack Murtagh for the Philadelphia Flyers. Murtagh, I think, slipped way too far in my eyes for a guy who's got this kind of offensive skill and doesn't have the size concerns that a lot of the other ones have. You know, he's 6'1", 198 pounds. That's very prototypical size. He's still only 17. He turns 18 August 22nd. So he's still 17 as I'm recording this, and he's got a lot of skill and a wicked shot. He was really impressive this year at the U18s, 6 points in 7 games there, and he's going to BU this year. You know, great school. They'll obviously do a great job, I imagine, honing in on his skills and, you know, developing him even further. But I think there's a ton of upside for Jack Murtagh as a real good scoring threat in the middle six, playing maybe the power play specialist too, playing on the second unit, you know, just in the on the circles, taking shots. He's got a lot of skill offensively, and I'm really excited to see what he can do at BU. But there's a ton of upside for this pick by Philly. I really liked it. They got a ton of second round picks, and they did a really good job with them. I think this was a really solid value pick at 40th overall. Another good value pick in that 2025 draft lands at 133 on this list. That's Jacob East-Wozniak to the Vegas Golden Knights. He's a guy who slipped down the board. He has a lot of skill and was projected as a mid-first guy originally at the start of the year, and then kind of had an underwhelming year and didn't quite wow people in the way he was expected and didn't use his size maybe in the way people were hoping. And he lacked some of the physical touches despite being 6'2". But there's a lot of skill and upside and potential in Jacob East-Wozniak. 57 points in 40 games at the J20 level. Couldn't really carve out a consistent role at the SHL level in 13 games, but I expect it to continue to grow for East-Wozniak. He's going to get lots of opportunity for the Swedish junior teams and at other Swedish national levels, and should have a better role at the SHL level this coming season. I think this was a great pick by Vegas. I think East-Wozniak's got a lot of potential as a high-end scorer, as a top-end winger. If he can, hone in on the rest of his game, the offensive potential here is really good. At number 132 is Yegor Surin of the Nashville Predators. A pick I wasn't too fond of at the time. It wasn't my favorite pick of that draft. But it's just a solid player right now. You got no real concerns. There's not a ton of wow factor for a pick player you took 22nd overall, but I think there is still some upside to get a real talented piece. Didn't quite have the breakout year you would have hoped for in the KHL after a really amazing MHL season his draft year. Didn't really have a great year in the KHL, only 14 points, but was still decent, and that's a men's league he's playing at a young age. We'll see if he can continue to grow his game at that level moving forward in the coming years. But there's a lot of upside in a physical, high skill forward, and those are rare, highly coveted type players, and we're starting to see that trend develop over all of the NHL. You see it in the draft, you see it in free agency, you see it in the trade market. Guys like this, 6'2", 198, with skill, with that workhorse, power forward mentality, are very highly coveted by a lot of teams, and Nashville's got a good one on their hands here. I think this is a solid piece who can play a multitude of roles if he develops well for Nashville. At 131, we have another Nashville Predator pick. It's a guy I mentioned earlier in Aiden Fink, a guy who's had a major breakout in the NCAA these past few years. After being a 7th round pick his draft year back in 2023, Aiden Fink has developed really well at Penn State. 2023, good 7th round pick out of the AJHL. He lit up the league at 97 points in 54 games, but it's the AJHL, so it's a little bit of a lower league. Then commits to Penn State, point per game his freshman year with 34 points, and this year had a major breakout with 53 points in 40 games, was one of the top players in all of college hockey, and is going to continue that this coming year at Penn State. I'm really excited to watch him. Odds are that first line for Penn State will be McKenna on the left, Fink on the right. Lot of opportunity for him to really develop his game and take yet another step forward. But Nashville's got a really good steal of a draft pick here with Aiden Fink, and there's a lot of upside offensively for Fink. Doesn't quite have the defensive game that a lot of teams may hope for. That's not really his game, only 5'10" as well, but the offensive game here is really promising for Aiden Fink. At number 130 is a player that I really loved watching this past year at the World Juniors. That's Brody Zemer for Buffalo. Brody Zemer had an amazing World Junior tournament. and he's going to be back on the team this year. So that was the most impressive part. Is he was, he still did this with 2 years of eligibility. He was only 18 last year, 19 going into the tournament this year, and I think he's going to be a real impressive piece for this USA team. It's going to be a real key piece if they want to go for the three-peat here. But a lot of skill and such a good skater. Smooth and extremely fast down the ice. It was part of the reason why he was so good for that USA team, is because nobody could keep up with him. 7 points in 7 games, and coming, it's not out of nowhere, but seemingly like no one was really expecting Brody Zimmer to be that kind of guy for this team. But he was really impressive, and again, his skating stood out to me so much. He was always the fastest guy on the ice, and I expect it to continue, and that won't change going into next year's tournament for Team USA. So he's going to be a real problem and a real guy to watch for the opposing teams. Didn't have a wow year at Minnesota, only 23 points in 38 games, but as a freshman, those are pretty respectable numbers, and I expect it to continue to grow this coming season at Minnesota as he continues to develop. But for me, the skating is so impressive with Zimmer, and I think just that alone, being able to skate at that level, that's almost that's a real big thing to be able to make the NHL in the future. The skating is so key. I think he's got that on lock there. At 129, Henry Muse, offensive-minded defenseman, another great value pick for Calgary, who's headed over to Michigan for his first NCAA season this year as he moved out of the CHL. But Muse is, textbook offensive defenseman. The defensive game has gotten better. I will say, I think it's gotten a lot better, and it's really improved a decent amount. And he's said it himself. That's what he's working on. And he was working on it in his draft, which is why his offensive numbers took a hit this past year. His offensive numbers skyrocketed again. 82 points in 68 games this season for a defenseman. Those are just ridiculous numbers. I think it's also a really good choice for him to leave a year early out of the OHL and go to Michigan, because there's not much more for him to prove at that level. And I think in the NCAA for Michigan, he'll get better coaching and have a better chance to improve his defensive skills there. I think it'll be a better program, that the higher level of competition will almost force him. If he wants to stick around, he's gonna have to work on his defense. I think it's gonna be really good for him, and he'll still get a good opportunity to show off his offensive skills. But yeah, as a right shot defenseman who's got good size, there's a lot of potential in Henry Muse. I think he's a guy who's got a good chance, maybe not a good chance, but he's got a real chance to be the third right shot defenseman on that Team Canada World Junior team. It'll be interesting to see how that battle shakes out. I think Brunick's got one of the top spots locked up. Perek will be there for sure if he's not in Calgary, and then after that, I think Henry Muse has a really good chance to be the next guy up on that roster. So we'll see what they are looking for in that defenseman, but I think there's a good chance you see him in Minnesota come December for the World Juniors. At number 128, another big riser out of the NCAA, that's Danny Nelson of the New York Islanders, playing for Notre Dame. Danny Nelson's had a real good development path in the NCAA, and I think a lot of players have, and it makes sense as to why all these players are switching over there. Players developing really well out of that league, and Danny Nelson's no different, Second-round pick, and since has been really, really good. 23 points in 30 games his freshman year, and then 26 in 36 this past year, while being the assistant captain on the U20, the junior team for the USA. 6 points in 7 games there. He was a real solid piece. And I think you're looking at a really good third-line center, third-line winger. Can do both, can do whatever you need him to do, who could play decent defensively but has a real good offensive mind as well. I think this is a real good third-liner in the future for the New York Islanders, who've done a wonderful job of rehashing their prospect pool. But I like the potential here on Danny Nelson. He's a player I'm a fan of moving forward. At 127, Leo Saline Wallenius for the San Jose Sharks. Saline Wallenius was a guy I thought should have gone in the first round of the 2024 NHL draft, but slipped all the way to 53 for the Sharks, who needed defensemen, and they got one here. He's not quite the shutdown guy they're looking for, the right shot guy they were looking for, but really good offensive skill, really good skating skill, really good puck moving skill for a defenseman who's bounced around a lot these past few years over in Europe. This past season he played in the J20 in Sweden, the SHL, the Hockey Allsvenskan, and the Liga. So he's bounced around quite a bit. This year he's set to play for Vaxjo, the Vaxjo Lakers in the SHL. So we'll see how he can do there in a more full-time capacity, which might be better for his development. But his draft year, he was point per game at the J20 level, which is really impressive as well. Another guy who should be on the Swedish junior team this coming season, should be one of the top defensemen on this team, if not the top defenseman, if I'm not mistaken, for that Swedish junior team. So he should have played a big role, probably going to be the power play quarterback. And he's got some big shoes to fill because Sweden's losing Tom Willander and Axel Sandin Pellikka. So we'll see if Salim Wallenius can be the guy that steps up and takes out that role for this coming year. But I think there's potentially could be because he's got the offensive skill to do it. He doesn't have the offensive upside those guys have. Let's make that clear. But, there's a lot of potential here for Salim Wallenius to be a really solid, second pair, third pair offensive defenseman moving forward. He wasn't a pure offensive guy. He's got better defensive skills than a guy like a Henry Muse does. But his game is still offense-oriented. And lastly, rounding out the first part of this list is Charlie Elik for the Columbus Blue Jackets. A really solid, stout defenseman for the Blue Jackets. Another right shot guy, which again, highly coveted. You want to have having the right shots they're rare, and getting them through the draft is really solid for your development. But Elik's got a real good defensive game on him, and he's got really good size at 6'4". And yeah, defensive shutdown guy who, he can put up decent numbers considering the style of play he puts up. He's not a scoring defenseman, but he put up decent offensive numbers for the position, the role he plays. But overall, at the end of the day, what you're getting here is a right shot, big shutdown workhorse defenseman who can play on your second pair. Yeah, he's not putting up like offensive numbers that you are wowing you. But again, at the end of the day, what you're looking for out of a guy like Elik is just the defensive game, playing wherever you need him, whenever you need him on the PK, and just shutting down, being a big, physical, imposing threat at 6'4". That's what you're going to get in Elik, and I think the Blue Jackets are happy with what they're going to be getting there. Skates well for his size as well, and it's a real solid piece to have there for the Columbus Blue Jackets. That'll do it for part 1, number 150 all the way to 126. I'll have the following parts coming out over the course of the next few days. Trying to get these out as soon as possible so I can keep going on, goalies and then into the pool rankings and all that sort of stuff before the season starts, when I can maybe get out some season prediction stuff. We'll see if that lines up with any timing I'm working with there. But I'm really excited to get started on this. I'm hoping you're enjoying this first part, and I hope you tune in to the next few parts coming out over the course of the next few days. So thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe, like, and comment, and to see all the future parts, and I will see you in the next one.